Hello, and welcome to SquishiVision, where I'm about to react to having just watched Doctor Who War Games in colour. So this is the re-edit of 1966 Pirate Chartered Final Story War Games, which is a 10-part serial. I think, if I remember correctly, those episodes 25 minutes ish a piece, so that was a 250 long minute, which is long. That's like basically longer than 2 feature lengths. That's 4 hours, 4 hours and 10 minutes. And I've seen the full War Games 10-part serial. I watched it, I think, probably more than a year ago, year and a bit ago. It has been a long while. It's not, I remember it being, it's not a bad story. I remember it feeling as long as it sounds. There is a lot of, I guess, padding. It's very much a story where you can get away with telling a lot of like mini stories in which they visit a lot of different places. I remember that much. I should probably have, in prep for this, actually read the synopsis of War Games, because God knows I wasn't going to watch it all in back to back to remind myself of what actually we missed, and maybe I should. And I didn't do that, and I've gone live now, so it's far too late. But certainly, I remember there being a lot more kind of like adventures in the different zones that we skip over, and you probably could get away with skipping over those. But what this edit does, that Daleks in colour also did, and it's clear they haven't really learned their appearance from, is avoid the feelings of whiplash. So there's some editing parts where I think they it's not that they cut out irrelevant things, it's just that the pacing is way off. Like literally you look away for 2-3 seconds in the first part of the episode, of the broadcast, of the re-edit, and they've gone from having landed in what they thought was World War One Earth to being to meeting a ambulance driver, to them being captured by the Germans, to them being freed by more British soldiers, to them being taken to the trenches. In like the space of 10 seconds, what I assume is much more longer, it's probably like a 10-minute part of the episode, gets compressed into 10 seconds. And that is pretty extreme editing. Hello Rudy, hello Heavier, welcome to my stream. And it was, I literally like, because I was watching the episode, and there's a Doctor Who Discord, not an official one, I don't know, well, it's what like fan base is affiliated with. But there's a Doctor Who Discord I was in, and they were doing a live watch of the episode, and so I had their chat up on my prompter, and I was glancing between my episode on my main screen and the chat on my prompter, and I literally like just reading this message for like 2 seconds, and I looked back down, and we'd already jumped what was like I think about a good like third of the episode that would have been the original broadcast. And then there was a part later on where I swear they crossfade between like half the episode, as in like there's something happening. I think it's when they're trying to escape, when they get discovered. It's when the war chief first sees the Doctor and tells his men to arrest the Doctor. The Doctor's already flee. And then there's a crossfade where they go down a corridor. Then they crossfade back to the Doctor having doubled back and attempted to trick the chief scientist person, while he's always been captured off screen. And then like we've crossfaded. There is moments of like just such absolute whiplash editing that is they really could have avoided, I think. I mean, I should have I should have checked and looked at what the actual original. I should remind myself, as what I'm saying, of what the original 10-part serial covered so I could recall what was skipped. But there are parts I'm sure you could skip. Like there's parts where Jimmy gets captured, and this episode does it by showing it on like a screen behind the people talk. Like Jimmy gets captured, and we cut to like an over the shoulder shot of people looking at a monitor on a console, and that's fine. That's like a whole like chase sequence we can cut. It's chase sequences like that which pad out episode times, which made much more engaging television back in the 60s that don't necessarily translate to modern audience. That's fine. It's when you whiplash cut between to the point where so when you do film theory, when you learn about film theory, you learn about like the consistency of time. So the idea is, and we take it for granted now. We take the idea of time consistency and time continuity. We take that for granted. We take it for granted that if we watch something happening and then we cut to another thing, a part of film language, and we cut back to another thing, we assume that the time progression has been same, and we take for granted these like cues that you get given in the way the editing works, where you can tell if there's been like a time ellipsis, which is basically the formal way of saying that we've jumped forward in time. Or whereas very early films of ages of film, that wasn't taken for granted, and you would cut. But this is like decades for Doctor Who. Like this is very early days of film. So why I'm mentioning like this whole idea of like time continuity is that there are parts of the episode you could cut and not get rid of the time continuity, because a lot of what 60s era Doctor Who would have done is cut between two different things happening at the same time, but instead of intercutting between the two, you would rest on one sequence of events and then cut to another sequence of events and stay on that for a long period of time, whereas this episode employs more cross-cutting, which is a much more modern kind of way of doing TV. And then that means you can overlay some stuff which is happening at the same time. But then we get to the point where stuff which we know should have taken a long period of time gets compressed to a short period of time, but we stick with the same people. And so our idea of time continuity gets really squelched. If I'm explaining that very well, it's been a while since I've had to like think about time continuity in a film theory context, so I'm kind of maybe muddling my terms here a bit. But the more and look, hello Jay Casali, I will mention your point later on. I'm gonna get to some of the changes they've made in a bit. But I'm talking about the editing. Editing at this point is still is what I think is letting the episode down. And I wonder, they're trying to cut down 250 minutes and 90 minutes. Maybe it's a bit more optimistic to have cut it down to 2 hours, perhaps. But there are parts of the episode where they literally cut within the same shot. They jump cut. It's like with film skips. There's a part where they're putting the processor into the bag, and they pick up the processor. Then we cut like 2 seconds forward. It's the same shot. We just jump. And then they say a line, and we jump to the next line. They did this in Daleks in colour as well, and it's very jarring. And I'm like, you don't need to do that. Look, honestly, we would be fine with 2 hours if you just actually not make these lazy cuts. Given this is an official Doctor Who kind of broadcast, so there were parts of the editing which seemed fast, and it's because it's hard to cut out filler because we follow the same 3 characters primarily, and I think anything that doesn't follow the 3 characters was basically scrapped, and yet there's still more they needed to scrap. So a lot of what 60s Doctor Who does is it takes its time getting from one location to another, and it struggled with that. The colorization looks great. I think I saw someone on the Discord say that the contrast was much better than Daleks, which makes sense because this is, I think, more of this, if not all of, well, a whole bunch of this is filmed on location, whereas I suppose much more of Daleks would have been filmed on a set. So that probably helped with all the kind of images looking natural. There was some colorization like goofs that I noticed. There was a part where the Doctor's escaping and he throws down a smoke bomb, and the smoke like obscures some of the controls, and it's clear that the colorist wasn't sure how to color through smoke, so they just like didn't bother. Well, not that they didn't bother, but they struggled, so they left some parts of it in black and white. There are patches of that. There were some points, if you pay close attention, where the color of like a block on the set, like the tilt changes a bit. The tilt, no, that's not the right word. The hue changes a bit. Saturation, both the saturation, some of the colorization like fluctuates. But other than that, it looks great. Especially a lot of the scenes, like the one in the background, look fantastic. And I think there's like behind the scenes online of them doing it, and yeah. So like, I don't have no issues there. So I guess we're talking here about some of the narrative changes or the insinuations. So Jake Casali, if they're still watching the stream, raised the point that in so there's they change some bits around. So let's go through it. I think the big change they make first is not a diegetic change, but when the war chief first appears, or when the war chief has a moment with the doctor, and during some dramatic moments with the war chief, because they mix some original score with some new score with some new modern soundtrack score, and they play the Master's theme when the war chief is on screen. The specifically the drum theme, the one from Utopia. And the sound of drums when it goes, and it's been a long standing theory, headcanon, fan canon, that the war chief is an earlier incarnation of the Master, and I think some of the expanding universe novels explicitly call them both Magnus or something. Like they're both act as if they're the same characters, and there's been an attempt to retroactively make this the first appearance of the Master. I think so that you can basically give as many of the Doctors as possible an encounter with the Master. And I mean, this edit doesn't make it diegetically explicit, but they do put that soundtrack on. To be fair, they also play that soundtrack when the maestro in the second episode of the season that's just gone with Shutigawa. They play that as well when Maestro first appears. So it's not definitive. Certainly some people in Discord seem to think it was confirmed, but they're leading into that. And there is a point where when they drag off the war chief's body, we start to hear the sound of regeneration, which again doesn't confirm it's necessarily the Master, because the war chief is confirmed to be a Time Lord and so would obviously regenerate anyway. It's implied that it happens as he's being dragged off, which is kind of funny because it suggests that there's a bunch of people dragging what is an exploding Time Lord off screen and perfectly just don't react at all to it. In fact, actually, they drop the body because the Resistance comes in and shoots them all. And we've got the War Chief just casually regenerating in the background, where my Doctor's not even like paying attention. It does kind of fill in a plot hole in that respect, but it is a bit weird. And then there's the big change of how the end of the episode is kind of... That's the part where they actually add in the most new stuff. We get a bunch of like insert shots of Gallifrey, mostly. I mean, some of the notable ones seem to be from Hellbent or Heaven Sent. I can't remember which of those is the episodes set in Gallifrey. Actually, no, I think it's from Hellbent, but the last shot of Hellbent where we pan towards the Citadel, that appears in the episode. And there's something a bit weird about putting in footage from a modern Doctor Who episode into the old episode. It makes sense for it to be there. I run out of water. It makes sense for it to be there. It is a bit water shonky. And then yeah, as Jake Casali says, when they threaten the Doctor with regeneration, and they offer the Doctor a chance to choose a new appearance. They replaced all of the what were in the original episode sketches with basically holographic appearances of modern Doctors. I don't mind that so much. There has always been like a theory that at least because one of the sketches does have a very much coincidental appearance to a caricature of David Tennant. Like it looks like it could be David Tennant. And I think some of the other ones look like some of the other Doctors as well if you kind of stretch. So replacing them with the new Doctors actually makes some degree of sense. It kind of implies this sense of like predestination with the future incarnations. It is, I don't know whether it says that they show Capaldi's Doctor, who is post normal 12 cycle of this cycle of generations, but yeah, I mean, Jake Side points out that they didn't put any of the classic Doctors in. They probably could have done that. Like for example, they could have. Oh, I missed my Duolingo. Damn it! I should have done that before I went live. That's fine. Like they could have had. Well, I don't know. The only visibly older looking Doctor is the one that they immediately regenerate into, so I guess you couldn't have them for that. You could have had Peter Davidson for the Doctor that the Doctor complains is too young looking, I guess. And then we get shown what is, I've just actually found online, is a VFX edit that someone did a year ago. Someone called the Confession Dial, if you search them on YouTube, made a modern version of the regeneration sequence. So the change essentially is that they send the Doctor, after you see the Doctor spiral away at the end of what is the original War Games, we crossfade into the TARDIS. We see the Doctor sitting down in the TARDIS, and they start to regenerate in their seat, and then they regenerate. We crossfade from them into, and I was watching thinking this looks a bit fan edity, and now I've seen online that actually is a fan edit, it's a fan VFX edit. It's not bad. It's actually pretty good quality for what it is. People are complaining that this might eliminate the possibility of season 6B. Not necessarily, because there is you could assume that when the Doctor spelled away, they didn't go straight into the TARDIS, but got scooped away and did missions and then got put into the TARDIS. So I think that's still like a possibility, very much so. Or you could, if you want to go along the, if you go along the theory that the Doctor was taken mid-regeneration, that's why they look a lot older, but actually that doesn't quite work. And actually, I guess in a sense this might eliminate 6B, because 6B assumes that the Doctor visibly ages during the time as when they're doing the 6B stuff, and then they regenerate fully, whereas this shows the Doctor at the more youthful stage. Although actually later episodes do confirm that the Doctor can kind of slingshot back into their original appearance at regeneration when they regenerate next, so that's not necessarily a like, for example, in Time of the Doctor, before Matt Smith regenerates to Peter Capaldi, he loses all of his aging back to how they appeared when they first appeared in 11th Hour. So I guess that's still a possibility. And so we basically get that fan edit. I've not seen that fan edit before. I do like parts of it. I like that we see the Auton orbs fly at Earth at the same time the Doctor lands. Obviously there's that nice little nod between is this the 70s or is this the 80s. But yeah, so it's, look, I'm never gonna advocate for this as overwriting the original 10-part serial. And I think if you can go with the 10-part serial, you watch the 10-part serial. I think this is a good way to I think this is a nice like re-edit, but I think you should always stick with the original, because that's just part of the Doctor Who experience. Anyway, those are my quick thoughts. I need to catch up on What If, so I'm going to probably do that now and do a reaction video to that because that's coming out every day, and so I should probably do some videos on that. So thanks for watching, and I will see you all probably, I don't know how many episodes of What If come out. Is it 2 or 3 at this point? An hour and a half, depending on how sleepy I am at that point. Okay, get out of my house.